with such incredible women.
Guys, we got it live.
So much brilliance on this panel, and just an amazing way to celebrate International Women's Day. So thank you all for coming to listen.
I'm in my pajamas.
The Gina Davis Institute and Moms First released this report, and my husband and I, our foundation, the Archwell Foundation, helped to fund it because I think from our standpoint, and certainly from mine, there are three key reasons why it felt vital to see the information they were going to be pulling through this report. So on a personal level, I've just always loved understanding women and our stories and our lived experiences and our shared experiences. So I was really curious to see what the report was going to uncover in terms of, oftentimes as women, you may agree with this, the way that we see ourselves is reflected back to us, sometimes accurately and sometimes, much to our disservice, inaccurately in what we see in media. And so to be able to have the findings to uncover what we can do to propel that, to make sure women are really feeling seen in a way that is reflective of who and how we are and how we move through the world,
I can bring that over here and use it as a
philanthropic standpoint with our foundation.
If you come over here and help me.
A lot of work to be done in terms of supporting women and moms. Begin with paid leave and and just really looking at, one of the findings actually said that working moms are paid 62 cents to the dollar for what working dads are, and it's almost feeling punitive at a certain point when you're a mom and you're juggling so much and carrying so much and you want to be supported in the best way possible. So it's those reasons. And we have a production company, and as we build out our slate and have projects that we're doing, or with podcasting as well, to ensure that we are responsibly filling in the roles of moms and women to be reflected in a way that's accurate. So this report, I think, is really valuable, and just proud we could support it.
Absolutely.
I have no idea what she just said.
A lot more about that. Nancy, I want to come down to you.
I have no idea what she just said.
She Googled that. Damage the inaccurate portrayals have on society. I'm just wondering what your reaction is to this report.
Yeah, so one of the findings of the Moms Report is that on television, moms are represented as thin, young, white, and not really working outside of the home.
That's Meghan.
A patriarchal fantasy, right? This is not our real lives. And it erases the fact that the U.S., out of all the wealthy countries, is ranked second to last when it comes to childcare and parental leave policies. And I remember when I was in grad school, that's when I had my first baby. And I found it harder to secure affordable and good quality, high quality childcare than to actually complete my PhD.
Wow.
That was how I felt. I mean, if anyone has ever looked for childcare, it's like the hardest thing ever. And so, when you're having, in terms of societal, when you have policymakers who are not working moms for the most part, right? These are the ones that are actually determining policy. And we know that if they're not actually having contact with folks, they're deriving their ideas from television, from film, right? Just subconsciously. That's not real, but that's what you're seeing.
Private text
everything's
messages.
Great. Working moms, they're just mostly at home, and men are the breadwinners. Meghan mentioned the motherhood penalty, right? Because men, when they become fathers, they get a fatherhood bonus. Yes, they actually make more money, whereas women are making less. So all of this reality is not reflected on television, and that really hurts policy and any kind of societal change.
Yeah, so we're perpetuating negative or wrong stereotypes when we could be perpetuating positive images and representation. So we know that proper representation is such a critical driver for social change. So Meghan, why is this such an important factor in making the world more equitable?
I've said this for so many years, and I hope that it starts to land, but I think we can all agree that representation matters in terms of, if you're a young girl and you see yourself in a position of power or strength or leadership, you can believe that that is possible. If you look out on the screen or you look out in the world and you see no one that looks like you,
do it while you're.
It is incomprehensible for most people to imagine that they can have that level of success or joy or strength, whatever it may be. And, the key thing that I think needs to be focused on in terms of equity is that it's not a zero-sum game. Just because someone else has the same advantage that you do doesn't mean that you're losing anything. And it actually creates an environment that is so fair, but also inclusive, where people feel as though they have a seat at the table, as they should.
Meghan, will you tell the story about when you wrote that letter to P&G? Because I don't know if
Oh my
if
God,
everyone's
she's
heard
talking
it, but
about the
it's such a great
soap
story
thing.
at a very young age, what you did.
That's so funny. Yes,
I
I
just
was.
disrupted the flow. I'm so sorry.
No, it's
but
good.
go
Let's
ahead.
have a conversation.
That's what I love about interviewing Katie. I think it's okay.
I was 11 years old. Yep, about 11 years old, and I had seen a commercial on TV for a dishwashing liquid, and the boys in my class at the time said, it said, "Women all over America are fighting greasy pots and pans," and the boys said, "Yeah, that's where women belong, in the kitchen." And at 11, I just found that infuriating and wrote lots of letters and put pen to paper, and they ended up changing the commercial to people all over America. And it's funny to look back at it now, because that was before social media, where you had a reach that was so much greater. It was just an 11-year-old with a pen and paper. But it just, I guess, goes to show that if you know that there's something wrong and you're using your voice to advocate in the direction of what is right, that can really land and resonate and make huge change for a lot of people. So your voice is not small. It just needs to be heard.
Yeah, this is where we're this is one of the ways we're way different. When I was 11, I was playing a prostitute. So
Okay, bro.
I wish I'd known
where
you
we're going here.
when I was
A little
11.
different.
I would have been writing very different letters, but equally important, I hope.
Brooke
Wow.
Shields is
11-year-old
high.
Brooke and 11-year-old Meghan, this one's for you. Speaking of which, we know that the situation is no better on film. Nancy, we have a recent study from the University of Southern California, Annenberg, that found that of the 100 top grossing movies in 2023, the year of Barbie, people, only 30 featured female identified lead or co-lead actors. That's a number that hasn't been that low since the mid-2010s. What's behind that regressive trend?
Yeah, so the finding of the USC study is that there are actually less women on screen in the year of Barbie. I feel like, are we living in the world of Ken? I mean, reproductive rights are being rolled back. Affirmative action is eliminated in higher ed. We have DEI centers eliminated across different states and corporations. And it feels really bad. And I think it speaks to what Meghan said, that this idea that, if I have to give up something somehow, it's us versus them, rather than, I think when women's rights advance, that advances society. When women are, working and getting equal share of, they're making money, they're actually contributing to the economy, right? These are things that are beneficial to everyone. But there's this really disturbing study that came out of the UK that Gen Z boys and men actually are more likely than boomers to believe that feminism does more harm than good. This is really scary, right? These are the young men in our midst. And so we really need to be vigilant about making sure that we talk about feminism and women's rights in a way that is beneficial for everybody, rather than this us versus them mentality. So I feel like, so that's reflected in the study, right? That we're seeing less women because there's this idea that, well, women are already taking over, so let's just put more men out there. And
God.
that's not where we want to be.
Absolutely. It is not the opportunity Olympics here, people. We are all, deserving of opportunity, and there's opportunity enough for all of us. So, Brooke, I saw you nodding your head over there. Pretty Baby, the documentary about your life, came out on Hulu last year. Yes, absolutely. It dissected the early days of your career, which you have alluded to already. For people in the audience who have not seen it yet, can you just paint a picture of what it was like as a 12-year-old girl working in Hollywood in 1978, and really how you feel today looking back on that experience?
Well, first of all, thank you. I was very lucky with the documentary. I've been asked to do documentaries for a very long time, and every time I would talk to the creator or the director, they would always end up being like an E! True Hollywood Story, or worse, where are they now? Never good for a career. So I pass.
Something's wrong with Brooke.
A very good friend of mine came to me with this idea. And then we spoke to a director, Lana Wilson, who's a beautiful director. And I said, I gave her all of my archives. I just handed them over to her. And I said, please, the one thing I ask of you is that you make this film about something bigger than me. And she said, well, it's a doc about you. And I said, I know that, but this is about a much bigger topic. And as we discussed it, we started talking about the sexualization of young women, especially in our country. And I was at the center of it. I was promoting it, and I was doing it, and
Whoops. And there it goes.
I was lucky because I was surrounded by a very strong mom. I never did move to Hollywood. I always went to regular schools. So I had this sort of community around me that was protecting me, buoying me. And so I did not become the type of statistic that Hollywood created. And listen, Hollywood is predicated on eating its young. That's what it wants to do. It wants to build you up and then devour you. And from a very early age, I learned the importance of education. And I knew that if I went to university, they couldn't take that away from me. So all of the pitfalls of Hollywood, that's the way it was being handled in the 70s and early 80s. And it's gotten better a bit, but we still have a long way to go. And one of the things the documentary, I think, did was start the conversation. I'm the subject of it. I didn't produce it. I didn't direct it. I had no say. I had to trust. And people don't really realize that, but just because the documentary is about me, I just had to hope and pray that the women that were handling it, and these were brilliant women, were dealing with the topic and dealing with the subject matter so that we could start conversations with our daughters, with younger women about how it happens, how it's just at the ready to you are prey, but not to be a victim to it. What I wanted to say too is I didn't want the documentary or anything that I say ever, it's not from a place of anger. It's not, it's more from a place of let's understand this and let's harness what we have as women. Now I'm a 58-year-old woman, so I have a different message. But Hollywood then it's not that different than it is now. But what I'm noticing is that there are more voices who are surrounded by other women and other supportive voices. And together as a collective, we can move it forward and have it not be angry, but have it be progressive.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I love the idea of strength in numbers. And to Megan's point, social media was not a thing that existed then. That's an added layer, to the situation in Hollywood now. Tell me about, you mentioned the conversation that you're able to have, that intergenerational conversation that you're able to have.
Something's wrong with Brooke Shields.
What has some of that been like? How has that been affirming for you?
The first conversation shocked the heck out of me. I wanted to say hell, but then I thought I couldn't. So heck. Shut the fuck out of me. That's really what I want to say.
Some people don't want to listen to. Yeah, some of you don't want us to play Brooke.
At the end of the film, the director said
something's going on with Brooke. Okay, Brooke's either allegedly on alcohol or allegedly high.
Music or whatever.
That's all I gotta say. Sorry, guys. If you're just joining us, we thought this was going to be on at 1:00 our time. We had no idea it was on now. So here you go.
First and last time my daughters pretended like they were watching.
I don't want your gorilla.
Want to put that out there.
I'm just.
I was like, oh, look, they've got the gloves on. Aren't we a perfect family?
I'm turning it up.
But we started talking about would you watch any of your mom's early films, and then would you let us do these types of roles now?
Wow.
And just the fact that I was having those conversations with my young women, girls, and the fact that they felt the ability to express their opinions to their mother without being judged was a huge, huge piece of it. And they talked about social media, and they talked about it. And we often talk about the dangers of social media, but if harnessed properly, it can be a very important perspective that then these young women in our lives can carry forth and have that messaging be a positive one. So to me, just being able to have that conversation was just the conversation at home. And now I'm watching it really sort of filter out into many, many other conversations that I hear on my Instagram or my community at the company I started beginning is now. And this is a conversation that's starting to happen, but we're also needing to have it with the younger generation so that we're not just standing up for something because we're complaining about a past, but we're taking these younger people and we're sort of shepherding them to have a healthy, inclusive approach to these types of issues.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Katie, I want to come to you because on-screen representation is something that I know you have been cognizant of for your entire career. So I know you took steps towards leveling the playing field when you were offered the job of co-anchoring the Today Show in 1991. Yes, hello, Today Show Hive, where are you at? Why was that so important to you?
Well, hi, everyone. I entered the TV news business in 1979. I am the oldest person on this panel, and it's really, I often say it's when harass was 2 words instead of 1. And it was not a particularly hospitable place for women. It was very challenging. At the same time, I think growing up, I was acutely aware of the impact media has on the way we see ourselves and our potential and the way we are in the world. And, you know, looking back, I think about the shows, the TV shows, for example, that were around when I was little. You know, it was Father Knows Best. Now, I was really little, so I must have watched reruns. But then in the 60s, it was the Donna Reed show. You know, these and I Love Lucy, very traditional roles for women.
Whoa.
And then in 1968, I remember there was a show called Julia with Diane Carroll.
Yeah.
She was Black. She was a widow. She was a single mother taking care of her son. And I thought, wow, that's different. But what was really formative for me was in 1970 when the Mary Tyler Moore show came out, because here was a 30-something single woman driving her cool Mustang to Minneapolis and working at a local news station. And suddenly I was 13 and I thought, wow, that's so cool.
Guys,
I
if
wanna
you're
be
joining
that
us,
person.
Megan has
So when I
spoken
was
about her
offered the job at
detergent
the Today
commercial. That
Show,
is it.
I said to Michael Gardner, who was then president of NBC News, I had worked in local news for 6 years. I had covered the Pentagon, covered the, Desert Storm and all these other important stories. And I said, I'm interested in this job, but only if you'll give me a 50-50 division of labor with Brian Gumbel. I want to do as many hard news interviews as he does. I don't want to be relegated to cooking segments and fashion shows and celebrity interviews. I've earned my stripes, and that's what I'm demanding. I don't know where I got the chutzpah to do that. I was like, it was crazy. I was 34 years old. And I was 5 months pregnant. And I just was like, so. And he looked at me kind of quizzically. He had a bow tie, and he said, what about 49.51? And I said, okay, I'll take it. And Brian Gumbel insisted that he open every show, that he throw to every commercial break, that he always threw to the weatherman, who was Willard Scott at the time, and that I could never do that. I think to convey the idea that he was in charge. But I think just making that demand, eventually, I think I had as much power and took on important jobs on the Today Show. But from the get-go, I said, this is how I want to be seen, because I knew the impact this would have, the dynamics of the show, the division of labor, who was doing presidential interviews. I knew little girls were watching that, getting ready for school with their moms. And I wanted them to say, look, she is just as good as he is.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I, for one, was definitely watching you both at least 50-50, and you definitely are part of the reason why I'm sitting up here on this stage interviewing you. So let me just say that out loud in front of everybody. So Katie, the industry really has changed a lot over the course of your career. In the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, it was still very much a boys' club, though. How much progress do you think that we have made?
Well, I think we've made tremendous progress. I mean, I think we have miles to go before we sleep, but you look at the 19th, what you all are doing, it's amazing. You look at, do you know the presidents of the news divisions of ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, and even Fox are all women? That would never have happened. That's extraordinary. And 2 of them are women of color.
That's right.
I mean, it's pretty amazing, but we have a lot of work to do, because unfortunately, this is happening as linear television is declining in its
Right.
significance. And as these outlets gravitate towards streaming, I looked at a picture of all the heads of the major streamers, and it's 5 white guys. So we have to tackle that, and I hope that will change. But when you look at digital media, it's much worse. I think 20% of editors of the most popular international online publications are women. And when it comes to podcasting, women are 50% of listeners, but men are 79% of hosts of podcasts. So there's still a lot of inequities that we have to approach, but we're definitely making progress. And I don't know about you, but compared to when I was doing network news, I see so many different people from so many different backgrounds. I think, in terms of the on-air talent, I think it would be really wise to get a bigger variety of socioeconomic and life experiences, people who grew up in rural areas, people from the middle of the country. And I think that would even add to the representation we're seeing now.
Absolutely, really thinking about all the ways we can be factoring diversity in, and especially at the leadership level as well. Well, Brooke, I want to come back to that Annenberg study I mentioned earlier that found that only 3 of the 100 top grossing films of 2023 had a lead woman actor who was 45 or older. So I'm wondering, as a 50-year-old woman in Hollywood, as you mentioned, does that track with your experience?
It definitely tracks with my experience.
Brooke Shields isn't a movie star. She's not a
we
movie
don't
star.
just feel this ageism in Hollywood. At
Why are you
58,
asking
you're, too old to be the ingenue, but you're not quite the granny yet, and they don't know what to do with you. And so if you're not the sort of the sexy woman at the bar, you're like in Depends or like dentures, or like those are the things you're offered, like literally. And so you have to sort of, there is something to that, I find. So what my reaction towards it again is, instead of to just get angry, find and ferret out the filmmakers who appreciate a woman over 40. I mean, I'm 58, but appreciate the experience, the life experience. We've raised the children, we've had the families, we've had businesses, we've had professional lives, we've left them, we've gone back to them. There's a versatility and an adaptability and an intelligence and an experience that we have. And I do see that there are people out there that are wanting to cater to programming for those women who just have a place.
Look at the Golden Bachelor.
Hello, and where's the Golden Bachelorette?
The Golden Girls, which was interesting, they were like 40 or something.
They were the same age as the
They were
girls
not
on Sex and the
40,
City
right? Yeah.
now, and just like that, right? Or
I think so.
yeah.
And just how different the perception was at the time. But now I think people are feeling more ageless now. But you're right. There's still a stigma in terms of the industry on pigeonholing where you can be.
Yes.
As opposed to seeing us as, the depth of knowledge and experience, as you're saying, Brooke, there's just so much richness that can be given to roles when you have an actor who can bring that level of experience.
And even in the beauty industry, again, I'm sitting here feeling slightly guilty as well, because I have perpetuated all these images. My entire career has been sort of built on beauty and that being forefront of all of that. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that I want my messaging to be appreciative of having been given the opportunity to make a living of that. But the importance of beauty as wellness, it's not vanity, but we're not just wrinkle cream now either. So there's a lot of different ways we need to sort of work on not just changing the narrative, but really massaging the narrative to really reflect that there is beauty in this age. There is beauty in all of diversity. There's beauty in how incredible it is that we're all so individual. And it's
Amen, sister.
celebrating that.
And get rid of anti-aging, like the whole expression of anti-aging, whatever.
Negative on both
Wellness.
both words.
Wellness preservation. I love that. Yes, and also just the idea that we are promoting reflecting the industry, reflecting the way that so many of us seem to perceive ourselves that is not showing up in our media. So I don't want everybody to think that this Annenberg study is all doom and gloom. Nancy, there is actually something to celebrate in that study, and that is the reality that the percentage of films with people of color in leading roles has increased as we head into Oscar weekend. Do you think that this indicates a significant long-lasting change, or are you concerned that as companies are pulling back on DEI programs, for example, this number is just going to drop back down?
So yay, we finally
Sigh to start this answer.
I feel like I'm like the doom and gloom person on the stage, but I think it's yay. Finally, we're seeing people of color actually represented as they are in real life. You know, this is the first. But I think, that when we disaggregate, we see that because we know that women are being underrepresented. So it's actually men of color that are more represented than women of color. So women of color actually went down. And yay for the small independent studios like A24, right? As well as international. Yeah, we love A24, right? And those are actually the studios that are driving the more diverse leads. It's not actually the legacy big studios. And we know that those are the power players, right? So we need to see them actually start to really green light and support projects that feature people of color stories by people of color, right? We want those really authentic stories. So yes, I think it's great that we're finally approaching population parity, but in terms of long-term, we need to see more people jumping in, and there's money to be made and there's awards to be won, right? It's like, why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah, I think that is the case to make, right? It's not just the right thing to do. It's also economically, and successfully useful to do. Katie, I want to come back to you and your trailblazing career, because you were also the first woman to solo anchor the CBS Evening News. Yes, absolutely. And you were managing editor of that broadcast. I don't know if everybody knows that, for the 5 years that you were there. How challenging was that to be a first, and how did being a woman impact the way that you did that job?
How much time do you have? It was really, I'm not going to lie, it was really challenging. I remember after my first night anchoring the news, it was very exciting. And the next day, one media critic said, "Why was she wearing a white jacket after Labor Day?" And I was like, "It's winter white, and I splurged on Armani, God damn it." And then it was like, Tom Shales, who really wrote nice things about me, said the way she buttoned her jacket, she looked chubby. Keith Olbermann said she looked like she had been Botoxed. A feminist, well-known feminist who shall not be named, said, I couldn't really evaluate her performance because her makeup was so bad. And I mean, and then somebody else, Dan Rather, who shall be named, said I was dumbing down and tarting up the news. So it was really, really hard. But, I'm very glad I did it. It's funny because I was so upset for a while because I was just getting pummeled left and right in the press. At dinner one night, I was with my daughters and I was crying. And my 10-year-old daughter, Carrie, was like, "Mom, what's wrong?" And I said, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And she goes, "Mom, remember what Samantha said on Sex and the City?"
Oh.
And I was like, oh shit, there is so much wrong with that statement. From my 5th grader. And she said, if I listened to what every bitch in New York City said about me, I'd never leave the house.
Well,
and it was so funny. But, just quickly in retrospect, I'm really glad I took the job, despite some of those hard days, because I think I brought my sensibility as a woman into story selection. We did stories on sexual assault in the military, on dating violence after Yardley Love was beaten to death by her boyfriend at UVA, a lacrosse player. We did stories on a woman who was raped by 3 basketball players and they were never held accountable at her university. I did stories in Afghanistan where I sat in a room with Afghan girls who were in a safe place where a man could never have gone. So I feel like I really contributed to what was on the show. And I also kept sexism from permeating into the broadcast. I remember I said to one of the 3 male news writers, Jerry, who I love, who had described Hillary Clinton in a way. And I said, "Jerry, Would you describe a male candidate for president that way? So I was a bit of a watchdog to make sure that women's stories were told, and the internal politics. Don't get me started. Read my book, Going There. It's a memoir and it's in paperback now. If you really want the juicy scoop on how the people
Katie's
at CBS
on a
treated
script.
me, they were
She
awful.
just plugged her book.
Sorry.
I'm not sorry. I'm ready to read this book. Megan, I want to come
Here we
back
go.
to you because social media has really become the go-to place for girls and women to be scrutinized, objectified, bullied, right? And unfortunately, I know that this is something that you are all too familiar with. So how have you been able to manage the seemingly endless toxicity that comes at you?
Yes, social media is a environment that I think has a lot of that.
Censorship time.
It's really interesting as I can reflect on it. I keep my distance from it right now just for my own well-being. But the bulk of the bullying and abuse that I was experiencing in social media and online was when I was pregnant with Archie and with Lily and with a newborn with each of them. And you just think about that and you to really wrap your head around why people would be so hateful. It's not catty, it's cruel. Why you would do that? And certainly when you're pregnant or you have a newborn, we all, as moms, it's such a tender and sacred time. And I think,
No examples.
you could either succumb to it or nearly succumb to how painful that is. And maybe in some regards, because I was pregnant, that mammalian instinct just kicked in. Do everything you can to protect your child and as a result, protect yourself too. But, I think as we look at what's happening in social media, there is so much work to be done in terms of keeping people safe. That starts as we see what's happening with children and their exposure to things, but also just creating these habits that what I find the most disturbing, frankly, especially as a supporter of women, is how much of the hate is women completely spewing that to other women. And I cannot make sense of that because I understand that there are certain platforms. Look, today's a really good example. This is being streamed on one of those platforms. And it's also fantastic because people are going to have access to hear all of this brilliance and all of this insight.
She's
and
nervous.
At the same time, it's a platform that has quite a bit of hate and rhetoric and incentivizes people to create pages where they can churn out very, very inciting comments and conspiracy theories that can have a tremendously negative effect on someone's mental health, their physical safety. So I think we have to really take a look at that when we're talking about how many women are in leadership positions, as you're saying, in broadcast. There are a lot of women that are at the highest level, executive level, who are great champions of women, who are great philanthropists, and they are working in these spaces, and yet they're allowing this kind of behavior to run rampant. And at a certain point, they have got to put the do's behind the say's and really make some changes on a systemic level. And then, on the flip side of that, we have a responsibility in all of that. The systemic change has to happen at the same time as the cultural change is happening. Because if you're reading something terrible about a woman, why are you sharing it with your friends? Why are you choosing to put that out in the world? What if it was your friend or your mom or your daughter? You wouldn't do it. And I think that is the piece that is so lost right now in what's happening in the digital space and in certain sectors of the media. We have forgotten about our humanity. And that has got to change because I understand there's a bottom line and I understand that a lot of money is being made there. But when it comes to making dollars, it doesn't make sense.
Oh, fuck off.
Yeah.
Can I just add one thing to that?
Yes.
Because what you said is also very important. It's impossible. Social media was not around when all the vitriol was being hurled at me and my mother and everything. And it was unbelievable. Now, I never read any of it. Had there been social media, it might have just disintegrated me. I don't know. But when, the whole idea of social media in your household with your young, in my case, women, my daughters were the ones to tell me, Mom, don't read the comments. And I found that really interesting. Not only was I learning from these young women who I've spent their entire lives telling them what to do and how to feel and how to think and everything, they were coming back to me and saying, I said, that's interesting. Why? And they both said, because there's such anger and negativity and vitriol out there. I hope they use the word vitriol, because then I'd be really proud of them. It might have been other words, but but the fact that in addition to what you're saying is we've got to make sure that we look right behind us too and bring up these young women who want to cancel out that messaging and only go towards the positive, because there's no function in the negativity. And every single little one of those conversations has to, I was with Gloria Steinem one day. Because that's what I do.
As one is.
I just hang out with Gloria. No, I was in a group of women, and we were all it was a talk that we all had. And women were starting to talk about, but how do you make a change? How do you make the difference? How do we move it forward? And she said, don't kid yourself. Every major movement started in a room like this with 6 people. And it's those little gems of those ideas. It's the small incremental changes that we have to be vigilant on continuing to do it. So it's having those conversations with your young children and with your soon to be a mom daughter, and change, and really starting on that granular level to make to have the voices be heard more loudly.
Yeah, all of us being part of that intervention to create the change that we know needs to happen. Meghan, last year, the U.S. Surgeon General even weighed in on this, issuing a warning that social media use is a main contributor to depression and anxiety in teenagers. The Archwell Foundation seems to be doing so much work at the forefront of the online world. So you are somebody that is also, walking the walk here, especially for young people. Can you talk about what you've learned and where you think we need to go as a society to better support parents, especially mothers?
I mean, I really think it can piggyback on what Brooke was saying as well. But, with Archwell Foundation, we work with Social Media Victims Law Center, which is very important and heart-aching.
She has no answers.
It's parents whose children have taken their lives because of what was happening to them in the online space, and the level of online harms that are there when you have these beautiful, vibrant children that are either being so aggressively bullied online, or frankly, these young girls who are going online and they're drowning in this world of comparison, that suddenly their sense of self has become so small that they don't see a value in being alive. So we've worked really actively with these parents to be there with them in their grief, but also in the interest of affecting change. I think as we're talking about all of this, and yes, this is very heavy and it's weighted, but it's also really real. There is a lot of good that's being done at the same time there's a group called the Youth Power Fund. I was just talking to them before I came out here. They are working so hard as young people who are in it, saying, this isn't making sense for us. We are not just a number or a statistic, and our lives matter. Our sense of self and our sense of purpose matters. There's a lot of action that's happening, to your point earlier as well, working as a collective. I mean, you mentioned Gloria. Gloria Steinem is one of the people that will say any sort of work that you're doing that is in the direction of good, you've got to make it fun. So even though all this is weighted, she loves working on a campaign. She loves what happens when you come together and you go, you know what, inch by inch, we're getting closer to seeing a much better place, and certainly a better online world. And I think we all just have a responsibility there to weigh in. As moms, it is a really, especially as I was saying earlier, when you're a new mom, it is a really
You're not a new mom.
time. And the effect that social media can have on new mothers, I mean, even just the lack of sleep because they spend all this time scrolling, but it can also be really dizzying for them to see this portrayal of motherhood that looks so perfect when we all know it's not perfect. We all know that it's messy. I'm fortunate in that, amongst the privileges that I have in my life, I have an incredible partner. My husband is such a hands-on dad and such a supporter of me and our family. And that I don't take for granted. That is a real blessing. But a lot of people don't have that same level of support. So I think for us, it's just trying to put the safeguards in so that women and moms especially cannot feel like they're even more vulnerable when they go online, that they can somehow feel like they are going to a safer place.
And Erin, I sense in the zeitgeist a real
upset.
uprising of people who are saying enough. You know, these tech
Yes.
companies really aren't going to do much. I was on the co-chair of the Aspen Commission on Disinformation with some other people. And, you know, it's clear that their bottom line is much more important than the mental health of American kids. And Jonathan Haidt just wrote an amazing book called The Anxious Generation. I think it comes out in a couple of weeks, and I highly recommend it. But he talks about the statistics and what is happening to teenage girls in this country and traces it back to the advent of the smartphone in 2010. And the changes we've seen societally as a result of a smartphone, particularly for teenage girls, is so upsetting, disturbing, and disheartening, you know. And basically their business model is keeping people on the platform, especially Instagram and Facebook, because those are the platforms teenage girls are gravitating to, so they can get as much data as possible, so they can charge their advertisers certain rates, and then ergo affecting the mental health, causing depression, particularly among teenage girls. So it's this vicious, not a virtual cycle, it's a vicious cycle. And I actually brought some stats because I just was looking at this book, and I thought I'm just going to mention a couple of them because I think they're so relevant. The impact of social media on girls' mental health is equivalent to binge drinking. Researchers in France found that girls who look at images of thin women, even for 20 milliseconds, become more anxious about their own appearance. Emergency room visits by girls for self-harm have increased 188% since 2010. There's been a 167% increase in suicide rates for young girls since 2010. In 2010, the percentage of teenage girls, when asked how satisfied they were with themselves, was about 70%. It has now declined to 55%. So we have a real crisis on our hands here.
And should be framed as exactly that. And that, I mean, the numbers that you just laid out, Katie, should be alarming to everyone, whether you are a mom, whether this is somebody that you know. I mean, they should be alarming to us as a society. Nancy, I want to come to you because there was another recent study from The Economist that found that 38% of women have had personal experiences of online violence, and 85% of women who spend time online have witnessed digital violence against other women, from defamation, hate speech to stalking, you name it. What is the best way to combat or eradicate this kind of harassment?
I think I joked, if I had the answer, you know, it would be so simple. But I think everything that everyone mentioned in terms of, I think Meghan mentioned systemic, and Katie mentioned just the knowledge. I think we all need to acknowledge that this is a problem. This is a mental health problem. This is a public health problem, right? And I think that me personally, as a woman of color who talks about racism and sexism, it's like, hello, just paint a target, you know, on my head. And I've gotten so much social media hate, and also social media hate that then transfers into your real life, right? So I actually quit my last job. I was a professor for 14 years, and I quit because my institution was just not supporting me and supporting the fact that I was attacked. So I had a troll email the president and try to get me fired, right? And instead of just kind of nipping it right there, they actually wanted me to answer this troll. And the troll was just saying I tweeted too much about Asians. That was the critique. And I was like, wow, this is just the level of, they don't understand, right? That the kind of critique that we're under. And so it's not just the platforms themselves need to do better moderation, but institutions like academics are actually being attacked all over. There are watch lists for professors. Sociology is getting eliminated, you know, as a discipline. I mean, it's this constant attack of anything that reeks of progress, right? And I think women and women of color who are speaking up are often bear the big brunt of it. And so we need all institutions. We need people to listen, right? When you hear someone that is working under you, if you are a manager, if you're president, if you're in any position of power, listen to those who are experiencing this and believe them and make changes and support them.
Amen. Amen to that. Katie, you mentioned, that book from Jonathan Haidt, which folks can hear more about in your podcast. You interview him.
I'm going to, yeah.
You're going to be talking to him. So as we mentioned, you started your own media company 6 years ago. You're using social media platforms to talk directly to your audience. How are you using those platforms responsibly as a force for good? That sounds like an example of how you're doing that.
Well, I think I realized, Erin, pretty early on that people were consuming news and information in a very different way. That's why I went to Yahoo and became the global news anchor. My husband made fun. He said, "Why don't they call you the intergalactic news anchor?" But I knew that digital platforms were going to be the platforms of the future. And so I started Katie Couric Media. I didn't want to name it that, but everyone said because my name is known, I shouldn't name it that, or because people were familiar with my name. And it's been really great. We have about 40 employees. We have a daily newsletter. I have a podcast. We do interviews. Like I'll do an IG Live with Michael McFaul, the former ambassador to Russia, or I did Kamala Harris for my podcast because I think these people trust that I'm a professional journalist. And so they feel comfortable with me and know that I'm going to be prepared and hopefully know what I'm talking about. So that's been really great. And when you look at the numbers, if I put it on my YouTube, I spread it across different social media platforms. And if you aggregate the numbers, they're just as high as like many network interviews are these days because of the decline of linear television. So it's been a really wonderful experience. And I work with my husband, who's the CEO of the company, because he has a strong business background. I'm the boss of me. I get to determine what stories are important. And we've got an incredible team of people. And it's just a thoroughly modern media company and a thoroughly modern approach to getting to people where they are on a whole panoply of platforms. And, it's been really exciting and given me a level of independence and not having to work for the man who says, she's too old. We really don't want her anymore. Like they did to Jane Pauley when she was like 42 on the Today Show. It was absurd.
How many years ago was that?
I want to take control of my own fate and destiny, and then be able to mentor young journalists and hopefully, help them along as well. And that's been a real thrill for me too.
Absolutely. And you are certainly creating, creating that blueprint for a lot of us to follow, in this rapidly changing kind of digital unknown landscape of where do we go from here in media and in journalism. Everybody up here is really so invested in creating community, fostering community, supporting community. Meghan, so much of your work with the Archwell Foundation is centered around uplifting community. What is it about community building that you feel is so vital, especially to the success of women today? And how is community part of that solution?
I think that, at the end of the day, I was talking about it a bit earlier, women especially, well, all people, you want to feel seen and you want to feel heard. And community is a huge, vital piece of that, because when you're part of a collective and you feel as though someone is seeing you, really listening to what you have to say, at a certain point you feel empowered when you don't feel alone.
She already said that.
Any sort of fight or struggle, any experience, really, you want to have someone that you can share it with. And so I think the community building piece of that is key. And as we were touching on earlier, because there is so much work to be done, that is not a one man or one woman job. And so the collective of all of us working together, understanding the shared goal that is in the best interest of our shared humanity is just key. You can't do it by yourself. And I don't think you want to.
I think that's true. Brooke, your community, Beginning is Now, which is bringing together women over 40. I want to hear more about that. What is it that you are trying to accomplish?
I started Beginning is Now more it was almost like my version of a blog during COVID, because I wanted to hear from women over 40 and what they were feeling they needed and how they were feeling they were represented, how they were being marketed to. I was feeling a sense of empowerment being at this age and almost an empty nester and feeling like my life is really just beginning in a very different, vibrant way. And I started this community, and the community grew very, very quickly, and I listened to them. And for me, the beginning is right now. And that's what I started. But this community amassed rather quickly. And what women were saying was that they felt overlooked and they felt devalued. And so to me, my goal was always to start with and maintain that community, because when you get a bunch of women all together, when you listen to them supporting one another and being galvanized by the belief that life isn't over at a certain age, there's a lot of energy and power in that. And I want really to help be a conduit to change the narrative on aging, and to be a leader in innovative products that actually women need, for their different needs that they have that change as we hit menopause and but we're not just menopause. And the real goal is to keep growing and amassing this community, because the power in it, and when you listen to women and when they feel heard, it becomes a movement. And I started out, and it's been miraculous as to how personally gratifying it is to listen and really listen, take the message, and want to do whatever I can to amass whatever experts I can to help forward that mission of women feeling like they can live with vitality and live fearlessly and joyfully and honestly, and that they matter still.
I think one of the big issues, yay to that, I think one of the big issues, we're seeing a transition to new business models, because the old business models are declining, but the new business models aren't really enough to support the kind of work we want to do, the content creation, digital news, et cetera. And at our company, we found a way to work with purpose-driven brands who, brands increasingly are taking on big societal issues, from gender equality to racial justice to environmental sustainability to health and wellness and cancer screening. So we have figured out a financial foundation for our company where we partner and do storytelling with things that they care about, things their employees can't care about, things that consumers care about. And that way we're able to sustain our payroll. And not only, while other media companies are shrinking, we're actually growing with this model. So I think you're going to see more people doing things like that, because otherwise, it's just simply not sustainable from an economic model.
Yeah, and by the way, focusing on half the population, the math for that seems to be, kind of obvious, and something for more people to think about going forward. So we're coming to a close here, but I want to just throw out one last question for all of you to answer, because as we've heard today, it's not all doom and gloom. And so I would really just love to know, across your fields, who you see doing representation really well, who you see rewriting the rules, who you see changing the game, whether that's filmmakers or showrunners or media executives who have pushed the envelope. Who is that person? Who is that for each one of you? Nancy, we'll start with you and come on down the line.
Can we name more than one?
I feel like supporting people like Ava DuVernay is doing amazing work. I mentioned A24. I feel like A24 is like a model, I think, for everybody to follow, in terms of you can like Moonlight, to Everything Everywhere All at Once. When you have authentic storytellers from those communities telling stories about, by, and for, right? They're not necessarily thinking, okay, I want to just reach the Marvel wide 4-quadrant audience, but we're really telling a story that is based on my own life experience, and that resonates, right? They're like, we're not that different from each other, even though diversity is wonderful, but we actually resonate when we see someone's truth. It resonates with something true in ourselves, even if we don't understand that completely, and we want to know more, right? We need to learn more about one another and develop empathy, and that kind of storytelling is what I like to see, and I hope that studios like A24 and other, and the big legacy studios can also start to follow suit.
I mean, they're the obvious ones, There's Shonda Rhimes, and there is Viola Davis, and
Grey's Anatomy.
That's very current and young, but I also believe that it is in storytelling. And there's a network executive. Her name is Christina Rogers, and I've done 2 films with her, and her main
idea and focus is storytelling for women over 40. And that was a very unpopular idea when she brought it up, and she fought for it. And it's not that I just want to only talk about myself, but what is very important is that we look at the big ways people can change and the big platforms that they use, but then the little ones, the smaller executive that is fighting for a storyline that does involve showing all of these the diversity of women across the board. And so I think it's also in the small little brushstrokes that I feel change is happening and growing.
As I get more into documentaries, I've done a number of them, but also even scripted projects. I am very grateful, as Brooke mentioned, to people like Viola Davis, who has her own production company, Reese Witherspoon. You wouldn't believe how many female-run production companies have popped up. Now, the question is, will the people who make the decision as streamers see the value of these shows that focus on women or focus on older women? Because people who watch these things, they do want to see, as Nancy said earlier, themselves reflected in the content that they're consuming. So I think there's, a lot going on there. And then, there are people like Kara Swisher, who has really made a name for herself and covering tech, but now so much more. Abby Phillip, I'm a big fan of at CNN. Jessica Valenti, I get her newsletter. It's all about abortion, and she keeps me up to date on reproductive rights. So I think people are finding their passion projects, and then they're disseminating their content to people who really want it and find it valuable. So I think there are a lot of exciting developments and sort of across the industry that we can be proud of.
It actually connects perfectly to what you're saying, because to the point of having so many fantastic female creators and founders of production companies that are making such good work. I think Bella Bajaria is such a great example. She's at Netflix at the executive level of bringing in the content that reflects our stories in a holistic and real way. She's a woman of color, and that speaks to our earlier question about representation, right? She's in that role, and in that role in a position of power, you were able to then share that more broadly so we can all feel more seen. Then on the flip side of a different sector, not entertainment related, but since we've talked about Gloria Steinem a few times, I think she's such a fantastic example of why we all have to keep going. She's turning 90 next month or this month. And, you look at Glow, and at 90, she still knows there's work to be done, and she's not throwing in the towel. And I think there's something so beautiful about that, to go, whether you're a 9-year-old girl or a 90-year-old woman, you can absolutely continue to make the change that we all need. And I think it's a great reminder for all of us.
Agreed. Well, listen, I cannot think of a better note to end on. I cannot think of a better way to spend International Women's Day. Thank you all so much for your representation. Thank you so much for breaking barriers in the way that each of you have and will continue to do.
Thanks,
Everybody.
Thank you.
What in God's name was that? No, that was crazy. Sorry guys, we had to do this quickly. Nancy thought it was at 1 o'clock. It was at 1 o'clock today, our time, because we're all on the West Coast here. What's that noise?
Don't worry about it. Just
Oh, I thought it was coming from the computer. Yeah, so that was South by Southwest. That was Meghan and a bunch of, Archwell literally just paid for what'd they pay for? An hour of
I have
plugging?
no idea. Okay, so this is what we're gonna do. I'm just gonna say the highlights of what we just saw.
Again, we apologize, guys. We
What
did
are
not
you doing?
Sorry, I'm trying to get it.
Here. Let's do what we usually do. There we go. Now move your chair. There you go. Okay. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna then come back later today with a smaller version of this show, and I'm going to extract Meghan's craziest things that she said. What I got most of all, guys, was how vapid her responses were, and it's almost like she wasn't understanding the questions. Like, does that make sense? Like, she's not good with comprehension.
And also she was saying, like, every answer was that's exactly what Brooke said, or that's
Yeah.
exactly what Nancy said, or I agree with what Katie said. And then the entire thing started out with the detergent commercial.
Okay, so it starts out she but the girl the MC or whatever, the
Yeah, it was
moderator,
Katie.
the
What was her
moderator,
name?
I don't remember. Erin. She
You don't have to
brought
yell,
up
though.
the soap commercial right away, which makes me know that Meghan's people told her to bring up the soap commercial. And so that was lame. They brought up Roe v. Wade right away. Now, I just want to say to the people that are not American, okay? Roe v. Wade, the Republicans were telling us
Let's not get
they
there.
wanted to overturn Roe v. Wade for the last, I don't know, for decades now, okay? We knew this back when Nancy Pelosi, Obama, and Joe Biden, when we had a supermajority in the Senate. That
Okay.
means we had 60 votes
We
in
know-
the
we
Senate
know
to
which
codify,
side. We know
stop,
side.
and make in 2008, or was it 2009, when Obama was president, Nancy Pelosi was Speaker of the
This
House.
is
No, because
not
people
about
need to
Meghan. This is
people
not about
need to know
Meghan.
this because they keep bringing up Roe v.
Who
Wade.
cares? Of course the left's gonna bring that up.
Okay,
What's wrong
okay,
with you?
They could have codified Roe v. Wade.
Of course.
They
this is-
didn't.
Guess what? This is going to be an issue between the right and the left forever. Enough.
Okay, all right.
God.
Brooke Shields was either allegedly drunk or high.
She was on something
I think
either
she
to
was
calm
drunk.
her down. I think she was on a benzo. And a lot of people in Hollywood take benzos. Robert Downey Jr.
Stephanie,
takes
I
them.
take benzos when
I
I'm on
take benzos too.
when
but
I'm
I was-
on airplanes, and I got to be honest with you, dude.
I'm just saying, let's calm down. Let's
Okay.
not yell. Nancy,
stop,
we're
stop.
live.
Um,
I think she was on Xanax or something. A lot of people
Yeah.
are saying Xanax. She was slurring her speech. She was not articulate. And did you guys see all the plugging? I mean, my God, that was crazy. I was terrified. I'm just trying to get everyone's comment in
You
here.
guys have, yeah. If you guys want me to get more, somebody said, let me speak. If you want me to get into why Roe v. Wade
No.
was overturned, I can tell you why it was overturned. It had nothing to do with the Republicans. This was all the Democrats' fault. And every single liberal that has fought for Roe v.
We know
Wade
that.
will tell you that is what happened. They could have codified it. They didn't. You know
Right.
why? Because if they did, they wouldn't have anything to run on.
And it's political.
It's
We got it.
political.
Yeah, it's
so
both
for them
sides
to
for
say that the bring up Roe v. Wade infuriates me.
Well, you
okay?
know the left's always going to do
It
that.
bothers me.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Katie Kirk brings up Mary Tyler Moore. I didn't hear that part.
Yeah, Nancy was in the restroom at that time in the little girl's room. She brought up they asked Katie Couric, the first question they asked Katie was, what do you think about women's depiction in television? Obviously, because Katie Couric is in television. And she goes, well, I just remember watching Donna Reed and thinking, wow, that's the way we're gonna like show women. You know, she's trying to be detergent commercial, Meghan.
That's all she remembers is Donna Reed.
Right. Then she goes, and then I saw this great show called Mary Tyler Moore. And she was waiting for the audience to clap because this is her script. This is her script,
Yeah.
guys. So she was waiting, no one clapped. So she goes, Mary Tyler Moore. And it was the successful woman in TV. And she didn't need a man and she didn't have kids and blah, blah, blah. Even though Katie Couric's had a husband and Katie Couric has kids. I don't know where she was going with that. But of course, she had to downgrade
Her
the.
husband died of cancer.
I know.
Yeah.
But she's married
She's
again.
married
yeah.
again.
Yeah, of course, everyone
Yeah.
knows that. I was there for that.
Yeah.
That was a big deal. So Mary Tyler Moore was her big thing. And then she was downgrading Donna Reed in the 1950 shows, which we knew was going to happen. And we did that episode yesterday.
But you know, I was thinking last night.
so that was her spiel.
I Love Lucy is one of my favorite shows.
I love I Love
have
Lucy.
all the episodes on
Stop doing
DVD. I play it all the time. I could probably just tell you every single I Love Lucy in order.
yeah.
And Donna, I love Donna Reed. I love all those shows. Still, those were very pioneering for that time because you had I Love Lucy, and Lucy would stand up to Ricky.
Oh,
She would
yeah.
do her own thing.
And she'd lie to him.
She had a kid later in life.
She
like,
did. She had a kid in her 40s.
yeah, they didn't have a kid until like Lucy's
42,
character. Yeah, she was
42,
in well, in her,
43.
no, in her, but on the show she was late 30s. But that
Wow.
was considered very late in life. Like even my parents had us at in their 30s. That's considered late in life back in the day. So I don't know what they're talking about there.
Yeah, she did mention I Love Lucy.
I love it when they always say we have a lot more work to do. Thank
Word
God
salad.
these women that are on the panel have no what do you call it?
Self-awareness?
No. They have no power.
Oh, they have no power. Yes.
Thank God.
Well,
These
this whole-
women are nobodies.
I wanted to keep writing in the chat, guys. We have to remember Archwell paid for that hour.
Yes, and 19.
They paid for all this.
Raytheon, Pfizer.
So Archwell gave all of that hour to plugging all those women, and they plugged. Wow.
Now
I want to go through we got to play a drinking game on that. How many times they plugged their own stuff? I'd be wasted.
I noticed that I wrote this down. It was a hate white man fest.
Mhm.
It was definitely a hate white man fest.
What do you mean?
Katie Couric.
What part did they?
Oh my God.
I don't
Katie
remember.
Couric had no problem throwing all the anchors, male anchors. Notice how she didn't throw the female anchor under the bus. She said, I won't mention the female anchor.
Well, Brian Gumbel is not white.
No,
And
no,
she did
no,
throw
no.
him under the bus.
Oh yeah, I forgot about Brian
She did,
Gumbel.
and that was a big deal. That was part of her script, and I actually do remember that. But she did throw Brian under the bus. It was definitely a hate man type thing until Prince Harry was brought up. But Brian Gumbel is African American, so she went on for a good 4 to 5 minutes on that whole rant.
Yeah.
And she didn't shut up because that's part of her script. But I appreciate what you're saying.
Brooke is not a movie star. Brooke
No.
tried to make it look like it's been so hard in this industry, doing this. Brooke, you're not a movie star. You did Suddenly Susan, which was a TV show that sort of made it. Kinda, and that was it. I don't know where she was getting that she's still in the business.
Well, and I loved at the end of it when she was plugging the 2 movies that she did with Shonda Rhimes's people, her PAs or whatever, and she was like, "I just remember doing those 2 movies, Oh, it's not about me though. It's not about me." I mean, she had to say that, and it's like, listen, I don't want to say it's Xanax, but something gave her delusional confidence in that moment to talk like that because you don't usually talk like that.
I think it was alcohol.
It could have been
seemed
both.
like it was alcohol.
It could have been both, allegedly.
They were talking about how women of color are just now being portrayed as themselves. Again, we went through TV Moms yesterday about like how we didn't quite understand.
Claire Huxtable was herself.
But then they were bringing up like women in the movies. As far as ageism goes and representation, Stephanie, do you remember who won the best female actress award at the Oscars last year?
Michelle Yeoh.
Michelle Yeoh, who's in her 50s.
And the supporting was Jamie Lee Curtis.
What are they talking about?
What's happening here is that Archwell paid for a bunch of women on a panel to complain about their own insecurities. Brooke Shields is saying, I'm not getting parts. Why am I not getting parts? She should not have put it in the 50s women category or how old is she? 60? I don't know how old
she's in her 60s.
60s. She should not have put it in the category. She should have said, I'm upset that I'm not getting parts because I'm old.
Yeah.
I'm upset. Or Meghan should have said, I'm upset because I'm a big grifter and a liar and no one's giving me parts in Hollywood. They're trying to categorize these people into, and it, you know what? They're trying to erase Michelle Yeoh. They're trying to
Meryl
erase
Streep, Kate Blanchett.
They're trying to erase these women.
Frances McDormand. I mean, all these women that have won Oscars at any age, and they're just trying to do it. Nancy Wang did not like how they're pushing back on DEI, and there's a reason for that. Did anyone notice how Boeing lost a wheel yesterday? It was flying to San Francisco.
Boeings are going nuts.
Boeing was the first of companies to say that they were implementing DEI. That's diversity, equity, and inclusion. They wanted to make sure that you knew that they were going to hire more women, and they were going to make sure that race and gender was a factor in their hiring practice. Now, windows are flying off Alaska Airlines. Wheels are falling off United Airlines.
I don't know what this has to do.
I'm just saying that's
up?
why she was upset because they're now they're scaling back DEI. Well, there's a reason for that.
Who
because
said that?
Nancy Wang.
Oh, I don't even know who that is.
But I can give
Nancy Wang.
She
kept talking.
She was annoying.
She was the one who kept talking about the production companies that weren't hiring women or
I wrote this.
I'm confused. Is this Kids in the Hall days where men are dressing up like women? Because I'm confused. I thought women were playing women in
movies. I don't know what they were
Where
talking
what were
about.
they? Nancy kept pushing that narrative that women are not getting roles as women. What does that mean?
I don't know
She
what
kept
that meant.
pushing that narrative. Again, we have to remember this, guys. Everyone take a breath. We are live. We have to remember this. Archwell paid for that hour.
Yes.
So nothing's going to make sense in this hour. It's a bunch of
and
words.
the 19th.
Sorry.
But-
Okay.
Okay.
We got to
But
mention that.
I wrote twice. Thank God these women are not important enough to be in charge of anything. I wrote that. I wrote that twice, and I circled
Good.
it.
What? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So when Meghan came and talked, Meghan had nothing to say. It was all word salad.
No, she kept saying, I agree with Katie. I agree with
agree with
Nancy. I agree with Brooke. Or I'm going to take what Brooke said. I'm going to take what Katie said. First of all, we know she steals stuff.
Megan had to bring up her pregnancies, which she has brought up before. Again, it was so not. It didn't feel like genuine. It didn't feel authentic.
I felt hollow inside.
I felt like she wasn't almost like she wasn't really pregnant, but she also brought up the almost offing herself. She wanted to pepper that. Did you guys notice that? She was like, well, social media was so bad that she wanted to say it so bad, but she didn't. But she's still running with this. I can't say it on YouTube, but you guys know what I'm saying. She was going to off herself while she was pregnant. She's still playing that. And she brings up Harry, how she's got such a wonderful partner.
Supportive partner.
That just goes to show you, this woman cannot do anything without Harry, without bringing him up. And did you notice that her name, Meghan, Duchess of Sussex? I mean, wow.
What happened today solidified that Meghan is nothing without the royal family. That just solidified it. Because if Meghan wanted to get up there, she would not have talked about her prince husband, and she would not have been backed by Archwell. She would have just, a lot. Listen, if people want to hear you speak, they're going to pay for it.
And she was gaslighting
the
crap out of us, guys.
And I'm sorry. Let's just get to the big freaking issue. Every single question directed at Meghan was about online bullying. Let's all talk about this for a minute. Let's talk about this for a minute. Online bullying. You want to know Nancy and I have only been doing this for about a year, okay? This YouTube channel. The first month we even started doing this, the Sussex Squad saw a menorah on my personal Instagram page, saw us lighting a menorah with a picture of my dog. The next hour or two, on my Twitter page, then they started talking about how they didn't want me to be like my ancestors. Well, no, I don't know. I'm just talking about the Sussex Squad. They didn't know if I wanted to be like my ancestors.
Yeah,
they were comparing Meghan to women of the Holocaust. They were being so anti-Semitic. So if we're going to talk about online bullying, let's talk about Princess Catherine. Let's talk about how people are putting up bruise marks of her face and saying William's doing it. Let's talk about how
that she's not even alive
Let's talk about how she's not here anymore on this planet. Let's talk about how Princess Catherine is old looking, how she doesn't wear enough makeup, how she needs Botox, how she doesn't color put color on her nails, stuff like that. Meghan was projecting. They might as well put a mirror on her face because she was talking about herself. Yeah. And if she had any class, Meghan would, at that moment, she had us, she had the streaming service, she had that panel. She could have said, you know what, guys? And I'm going to say this right now. I want the people who are talking for me, Sussex Squad, to stop. Because it's not, I'm saying, could you imagine if she did though?
Yeah.
I want you guys to stop this now.
Yeah.
Because it's not helping anyone.
Yeah.
It is creating a war. And what you guys are doing is trying to get women to off themselves. That's what she should have said. Because could you imagine right now Princess Catherine sitting in bed having to deal with this?
Jennifer has a good point. So let me get this straight. Also, I'm joining late. The non-representation of working moms in media is what needs to be addressed as opposed to what we actually need. Exactly. I know they had no examples. Did you guys notice that? They didn't really have any examples of non-representation in the media. They just kept complaining.
They had a lot of examples about Meghan being bullied. They had no. Nancy had no examples. Nancy wrote down on the note. She goes, "Where are the examples of you getting bullied while you were pregnant?" all I remember,
she was pushing censorship.
all I remember when she was pregnant was how happy I was for her. How joyous I was that Prince Harry was finally going to have a child, and Princess Diana's legacy was going to be brought down again, and Charlotte and George and Louis were going to have cousins. That's all I could think about. Where's the bullying, man?
There's
You
no
were not
examples.
bullied.
There's no example.
She needed to come out with one example. That's the thing. Nancy and I have receipts. We have receipts on the Sussex Squad and how they are bullies. Sorry, my dog.
Luna's upset.
Luna, it's okay. But I'm just saying, we have receipts. Princess Catherine has receipts. Our friends out there, Sue Smith, Megan's Mole, Resting Dollface,
Everybody.
Real Housewives recaps. We did a whole episode with Jen on receipts. Where are the receipts, Megan? I want to see the receipts. Where's the bullying? Where was it? Where was it?
Receipts. Nancy Wang, I wrote, is a
Show Luna. They want me to show Luna.
Is a
She's 70 pounds.
is a professional.
She's 70 pounds.
Nancy Wang is a professional victim, because Stephanie wrote down that she thinks Nancy Wang was fired from that job.
She
Nancy
was.
Wang told this really weird story about how she had to leave a job. No, something was going on. Nancy Wang is like the definition of professional victim. That's Luna.
I would pick Luna up, but she's 70 pounds.
70 pounds of love.
That's Luna. She's 9 years old. She's a rescue pit bull, and she is the light of my life. Everyone adopt a pit bull.
She is a sweetheart. Word salad. They used a lot of words like storyteller over and over again. Authentic, life experience.
That's the
Truth.
drinking game.
Resonate, empathy.
That's the drinking
I
game,
didn't
guys.
know this was going to come on at 10 o'clock. You know, I
Now,
didn't
again,
know.
we apologize. That was the most rinky-dink thing we could have done. We had to get our tripod in Nancy's phone, and I apologize again because I think your boyfriend texted you a few times.
I put my hand up
Yeah,
there.
put your hand up there. But that's all we could do because we didn't know. Nancy thought it was at 1 o'clock. We were excited. We were like, oh, we got like an hour.
Yeah. We will be back with the highlight portion. I mean, what she wore, I knew. Didn't I tell you she was going to wear white? Didn't I say? I said
we
she'll
both
wear
did.
white. Yeah.
We said white or beige.
Yeah.
White or beige, because it's got, she's got
Yeah.
to keep up with the uniform. And that's a lot of thing about
Let's talk about how she had
censorship, though. Do you notice censorship? They
But
want
let's-
everybody to wear the same thing.
Let's talk
They want
about-
everyone to speak the same way.
Let's talk about how Harry had to go to Austin with her.
Oh,
Let's talk about that.
at
They
the
were at the
Soho.
Soho House. We're also going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how they went to the Soho House, Austin. Aw, how cute.
Yeah, because they
So
had, and a
lame.
lot People Magazine is spinning it like they had to recreate their first date. First of all, their first date was not in Austin.
It wasn't a date.
It wasn't in Austin. It was
It's at the Soho House, London, but it wasn't a date.
No, it wasn't a date.
It wasn't a date. Okay, he went to the Soho House. She was there.
So Harry is
They
there.
hooked up.
Okay, so what Marsha's asking, was Harry there?
Yes,
So
Harry's there.
People
Supposedly.
People Magazine say Harry was there, and they were trying to recreate their first date at the Soho House.
No, basically that it was an ad for Soho House, Texas, or Austin.
Austin.
That's what it was.
That's all
an
it
ad.
was.
And when I was there, I remember I was like, Stephanie's like, "Are you guys going to go to the Soho House?" Like, are you
I
crazy?
did ask.
That's
that.
where swingers go. I'm not going to go
No,
to the
that's
Soho.
not.
Oh, I'm sorry, Soho
They're-
House.
you know what, Nancy? Nancy,
It's played.
they're building one 4
You're
blocks away from our house.
I don't
Do you
think-
not want to get? Do you not want to get?
I don't think that's going to get built.
Why? It's
I-
built,
it's
they're
just-
building it right now.
It's taking way too long.
No.
Taking way
It's
too
got to.
long.
They got to have.
Steph, it's been
private-
being built for 5 years. Dude.
Okay, well, you just got us off the list.
Okay. So we're going to let you guys go. You've been here long enough, but we are going to be back today with pictures, highlights of what Meghan said, so I can kind of condense it a little bit and look at it again. And we want to hear your thoughts as well.
Thanks
So,
everybody for
thanks
staying
for
with us
being
again.
with us.
We apologize for the tripod, but that's all we could do because we didn't know
I
it was
didn't
on.
know.
Okay, so we'll be back on shortly, and we're going to come back with the entire what do we call, rundown, recap.
Recap.
Okay, love you guys.
Bye, guys.
And